Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar channel of the Association of Certified E-Discovery Specialists. My name is Mike Guadarraro. I'm the president of ACED. Today, we are joined by our fabulous partner, Veritone, for a webinar entitled How Automating E-Disclosure with Audio, Video, and Native Document Translations Saves Time and Money. Before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items. We love questions. We're always happy to take questions. They can be submitted in the Q&A widget located at the bottom of your screen. All questions are anonymous, and we will get to them as we can. Also, if you'd like a copy of the slide deck from today's presentation, you can download it from the resource widget at the bottom of the screen. Without further delay, let's go over our agenda today. So we'll start with a couple of quick introductions, and then we'll spend some time talking about pain points with audio and video evidence. Then we'll transition into everyday audio-video sources and use cases, technology innovation and its impact on the e-disclosure processes, the technology that's available, Veritone's Illuminate, Translate, and Redact, and then we'll talk about some takeaways and some best practices that everyone can take back to their office and put into practice on day one. We are joined today by Chris Ricciuti, VP of Product for Legal and Compliance from Veritone, Amy Tal, CEO and founder of Strategem Tech Solutions, and I will be your moderator. Let's start it off, Chris, if you would, with some pain points with audio and video evidence. Take it away, Chris.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael, and welcome everyone today for attending, and thank you for attending the webinar. We wanted to kick off today talking about audio and video, and its increasing presence in ESI, or as part of ESI. So as you know, e-disclosure goes beyond today email and documents, right? So in the past, e-disclosure is about finding relevant email and or documents, but essentially text-based structured information. But today, increasingly, we're seeing an abundance of audio and video ESI being generated from a variety of sources. So for example, the rise of the remote worker and remote communication tools. Oftentimes, employees are remote. They're having discussions via not only just audio conferences, but now video conferences. There's some examples where meetings and messages are being recorded, and then those become business records that need to be analyzed. But ultimately, the bottom line is that audio and video can't be assessed and reviewed in the same way or as easily as email and documents. And that's primarily because audio and video is unstructured information. So, whereas with email and documents, you might be able to go into an e-discovery tool and type in some keywords or type in some phrases to search across that corpus of information to try to find what's relevant and call down to what's relevant. With audio and video, because it's unstructured data, you can't out of the box easily do that. And so that oftentimes requires legal teams to spend hours kind of manually reviewing audio and manually watching video to find out not only which audio and video files are relevant, but which segments of those audio and video files are relevant or responsive to their legal matter. So as you might imagine, that's not really a scalable and not really a costly solution. And so there's this need to help assess audio and video to kind of make sense of it all as part of e-disclosure and part of calling down audio and video. And Amy, do you have any experience here as well on your side? What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. I mean, the points you've just stated are absolutely valid, but I just wanted to take a step back as well to give the participants just a bit of a perspective as to the type of the volume of data we're now currently dealing with. When you think of it from the fact that 90% of the data that we're dealing with today, structured and unstructured, was actually created in the last 24 months, and we're talking about at least 80% of that is unstructured. That's a huge amount of data, and this is just the beginning. Going forward, we're going to see a lot more. When it comes to different types of data, we're so used to dealing with e-discovery and documents, etc. And I think from an e-disclosure, e-discovery perspective, we've got some really good, fantastic, intelligent tools out there that can deal with that. But audio and video data have always been an issue to a point where some organizations will go as far as switching that off so that it's not available, and in which case it's then not disclosable. But we've gone beyond where you can actually just go in and switch these types of data off or disable them in your environment and end up in a situation where you would not have anything of that nature at all in the mix. We talk about BYOD, people using their mobile devices. We're talking about CCTV within the environment. We're talking about audio. It could either be freestanding, and it could also be embedded in videos. So these are the types of data that we're now seeing today that part of a litigation matter, we will need to start looking to reviewing that. And if you haven't already, you need to start looking at that now. And it's extremely important. We need to know that the technology is out there, we can meet the requirements. And it's not just for even litigation, because most of the time we work in the civil side of things, so we're talking about e-disclosure. But even in the criminal side of things, we still need to disclose evidence, we still need to disclose documents that are pertinent and relevant to any criminal matter. And in instances like that, we need to be able to view those documents. Now, I know most of you on the call are going to agree with me, because until recently, majority of people, when it comes to audio evidence and sometimes even video, they go to the good old Microsoft Windows Media Player. That's the go-to tool to listen to this type of evidence. When you look at the current state at the moment, we know that it's not humanly possible anymore. If you have a data set, audio or video data set of 5,000 hours, 6,000 hours, people do not have the time nor the resources, not to mention the cost, to just sit there and scanning through these types of evidence, especially when it ends up not being searchable, and you then have to then go elsewhere to try and transcribe these types of evidence. So, Chris, I fully agree with you. The way it is at the moment, current state, there is a really big need and focus on tools and what can be done with audio and video type of data when it comes to legal matters.
Totally makes sense, Amy. And in terms of the kind of everyday audio and video sources, right? You mentioned that Windows Media Player is not a scalable solution when it comes to not just listening to audio, but listening to audio as part of video, and then also reviewing the visual component of video as well. And the fact that Media Player just doesn't work anymore given the volume of data. So if we were to look at some of the sources, and I'll speak in the context of Veritone and what we've heard from some of our customers, then I could pass it to Amy to see what she's seen in her practice. But it goes without saying that recorded telephone calls are an increasing source of audio ESI. Oftentimes we've seen that in banking or in certain call centers, the telephone calls are recorded for a variety of reasons, including quality control and compliance, and those recorded audio recordings messages can end up being part of the e-discovery or e-disclosure process in terms of needing to cull down. And at larger companies in particular, we found that the volume of such recorded data is massive. And again, using a player technology like Media Player, Windows Media Player, or otherwise is just not a scalable solution. But additional sources of data that we've seen in our day-to-day are, mobile phone extractions, right? So not only are there voicemails that are recorded on mobile phones like iPhones or Android phones, there's also videos, right? People are using their camera to take videos quite often on those mobile devices, and you need to be able to not only extract the data from those mobile devices potentially, but then make sense of it all and find out if it's relevant. We also, Amy mentioned kind of the law enforcement use case as well, and in the criminal matters. Surveillance videos are increasingly part of the corpus of information as well. Like, so some of our customers, we call it public safety. On the public safety side, we've seen that police body cam footage is often evidence that needs to be reviewed, or dash cam footage as well. But then with respect to corporations, and we'll go through an example of this next, CCTV, so closed circuit television, security cameras, lobby monitoring and recording, right? There are all these additional sources of video that are coming up that need to be reviewed as well. And lastly, I'll just mention that social media and video sharing sites like YouTube or Vimeo are also present in our customers' information that they need to review. So again, taking all these sources of audio and video and being able to quickly search for keywords and phrases across them and cull them down and really find what's relevant or responsive to your matter just doesn't work with legacy, let's say, methods or traditional methods of review that you might have done for text-based information. Amy?
Yeah, I absolutely fully agree. And just looking at the slide, when I see some of the sources here, it actually just brings back so many horrible memories on past cases I've worked on where audio and video had seriously featured into the evidence mix, but there were so many kinds of issues there in play. For instance, I look at the whistleblowing hotline. I mean, I used to do a lot of work where whistleblowing information will come in, and that would be basis for an investigation. Now, the problem we had was one of two things. Either the message was still on the phone system, but there was an issue as to how do we search that message, because most of the old recording hotlines will record messages for a whole day. It doesn't actually segregate which message belongs to a different caller. You just have them recording on top of each other, and you ended up with hours and hours of recordings. Unfortunately, again, going back to the Windows Media thing, you couldn't search the calls at all. So it was either you sat there listening to it step by step, or you actually tried to get it transcribed and then somebody can review it. Even with the transcription side of things, we know that you can never get 100% accuracy. That much we agree. But some of the technology that had existed in the past wouldn't even get close to 60%, which in itself caused a lot of problems. As Chris quite rightly said, mobile phone is featured in everything we do. And then when you think of BYOD and people being able to use their phones in the corporate environment, you are more than likely to get evidence on these phones that you will need to review and listen to. That would cause problems too. Looking at social media, I remember a few years ago I was working on a case. It was a director disqualification case, and we needed to look at this director. And it was to do with how he was advertising his business, how he was selling the businesses, and the promises he was making when he was making his recording videos. And it was so fantastic that we were able to find all these videos on YouTube, because the company at the time, it was doing really well. They had posted it up there, but when it went bust, they forgot to take it down. And we were able to gather, I believe it was almost about 200 hours of recordings. So we had all those recordings. We were absolutely excited about it. But the next step was, how do we review this in a manageable manner so that we can get what we need out of it without having to put too much resources and having people sitting there for 200 hours. And that caused a really, really, really big problem. And I remember at that point then, the hope and the wish was, we wish there was a really decent tool out there that had all the intelligence in the back end so that we can use and make our lives a hell of a lot easier. I've also dealt with cases where we've had to use surveillance TV video, CCTV, again, all about reconstructing it, looking at it frame by frame, identifying which frames were relevant and being able to use it. So, Chris, again, I fully agree with you with regards to the sources of audio and video evidence. And as technology innovations keep playing on a day-to-day basis, we're bound to see even more sources of this, and we need to know that we're able to get access to that data.
Exactly right. And one great example of one of those sources of audio and video that we mentioned on the previous slide, but we'll dive into a little bit more here, is closed-circuit television monitoring systems, so basically video capture. And in this example, we're displaying, let's say, a bank lobby, but of course, security cameras or closed-circuit TV can extend well beyond, a bank's lobby. But in terms of, to Amy's point, having to make sense of not only multiple videos, but also each frame within the videos, that's where it becomes extremely challenging with traditional manual-based review. So if we were to look at, in this example, this lobby monitoring system at this fictional bank in this case, let's say that there are a series of cameras throughout that are recording 24/7. And what types of things might a reviewer be interested in identifying easily, potentially, within the audio and video portion of what's captured from those CCTV cameras? So, for example, you might want to be able to recognize certain faces in the context of whether or not a particular individual is authorized to be in a certain area of this, in this example, a certain area of the bank. So could you easily recognize an authorized employee versus someone who's unauthorized in a certain section of the physical room that is being recorded across a potentially large number of videos spanning a large or a wide date range, right? It's again challenging with traditional methods. Similarly, you might want to identify certain objects. So when it comes to a public safety scenario where somebody committed a crime in the bank lobby and you're trying to pare down and find out exactly where that happened and when. Of course, you'd have in that case some understanding of when, like a rough understanding. But to be able to easily search for and identify, let's say, certain objects, right, like weapons or explosives or whatever the scenario might be, easily and efficiently across the video is quite challenging. And then in addition to that, the foreign language capabilities of video recording. So let's just say again, this bank lobby is being monitored and there are some individuals speaking foreign language, and you might not easily be able to understand, obviously, as part of your review of that video and that audio portion of the video, what it is exactly that individuals or those individuals in question are saying. So you have a need not only to understand the audio portion of English speakers or whatever your native language is, but you might have a need to understand the foreign languages that are spoken on that audio track as well. So Amy, I don't know if you had anything that you wanted to add here as well, given your experience.
No, you've actually covered this really quite well, actually, in quite detail. But just to add that, I mean, I've done many investigations where this is the exact scenario and trying to identify individuals' movements back and forth within an environment or a building. And the CCTV monitoring video caption or surveillance has been extremely fantastic, to say the least, when it comes to evidence. The problem is never the source of evidence. We know the sources are there. We know when we go there. We know when we look at what's there and we find what we want, we know that's going to be fine. The whole idea and the problem here is the fact that we're now dealing with what we call big data. So even with CCTV, you're going to end up with a huge amount of data that you have to scan through. Yes, you'll always still need the human element and the analysis side of things to look at this data, but it's the tooling that's never been in place properly before until now for us to be able to do it. And the whole idea is not only for the participants to understand that all of this type of evidence, this data do have evidential value, but to also get them to recognize that there are now tools that can be used for you to do this, rather than ignoring this type of evidence and getting yourselves in trouble because you haven't disclosed everything that you needed to, and you're not adhering to court agreements or regulatory requirements.
Great. Hey, everyone. Just want to remind our attendees that we are looking forward to your questions. We've got a couple, and we've kind of sorted them out by slide. So, but if you have a question, just use the Q&A widget at the bottom of the screen to ask Chris and Amy any questions you might have. Great talk about sources. Let's move on. Whoops, sorry, but too far. Chris, take us through a little bit of innovation and its impact on e-disclosure processes.
Yeah, exactly. So we've established that the manual processes around reviewing audio and video are time-consuming. They're costly. They're not scalable, primarily because it requires potentially more humans than you have available to review the large volume of audio and video data in a confined amount of time. So in this section, we'll talk a little bit more about some of the innovations in technology, particularly artificial intelligence, and how artificial intelligence can take that structured data, make it effectively searchable, that unstructured data, make it effectively searchable, and help you to pare down and cull down and identify more easily and more effectively what it is that you're looking for across that audio and video. So the first example is transcription, so machine-assisted transcription specifically. And effectively what we're talking about in this case is taking the speech portion of audio, and that would be the only portion of audio, but also the speech portion of video, and turning that speech into text. And once that text is generated, you can use that text, or you can search against that text for certain keywords and phrases. So if you have, again, large corpus of audio and video that you need to review, you can run it through a AI-based transcription capability that will take all of that audible voice, essentially, turn it into text, allowing you to put in keywords and phrases and search and locate not only the audio and video that are search hits, that come up as search hits and are relevant for whatever you're searching for, but also the moments in time where those keywords exist within the audio and video. So that's where it really starts to get powerful, because you can, again, if you have 1,000 audio and video files that you've ingested and run through this capability, you can then search for it and find those precise moments of time within the audio and video where those words were uttered by a person or persons. So definitely does a great job of saving time and, of course, in the process, saving money. In terms of the next example where innovations in artificial intelligence can help, most of us at this point have heard and watched various news articles and reporting on artificial intelligence, specifically facial recognition. And there's a fair amount of controversy around facial recognition, depends on the context in which it's being discussed. But from our perspective in this group, it's immensely beneficial with respect to culling down, video evidence that in which case you might be looking for certain people. So with AI-based face recognition, you're essentially able to, much in the same way that you're able to search for keywords and phrases across audio, you can effectively do the same thing, but for people's names. Right, so let's say, in this example, we have this individual, Juan Carlos Ochoa, and we've trained an algorithm to recognize his face. And the way that we do that is we just supply a few photographs of that individual to this algorithm. And subsequently, as your corpus of video data is ingested into the platform or into any technology capability that you have in this regard, the AI will automatically identify all the videos where this particular individual is present, and then also, again, those precise moments in time within each video where this individual is present. So it's extremely, extremely powerful. And then somewhat related to face recognition is just generically face detection. So in that case, we're not talking about identifying specific people by name and searching for them by name and by face. We're just saying, okay, find me all of the faces. So if there's a scenario where you have an extended amount of video capture from CCTV and no one is present except for a small moment in time potentially across that long, lengthy, timely video feed, you can easily just say, show me all video feeds or the moments in time in that long video feed where a particular or any face was identified, right? So the distinction between face recognition and face detection is just looking for any face. Recognition is looking for specific faces. So again, all this kind of comes together to make it much easier to identify what it is that you're looking for with respect to your legal matter. The third category of where AI can help is similar to face detection, is object detection. So in this case, we're not looking for people anymore across our corpus of video. We're looking for certain objects, right? And I gave an example earlier in the lobby monitoring scenario where effectively we might be looking for certain items that might be on a particular person or not on a person, like a handgun or some kind of weapon. But really, objects could be anything. It could be a bottle on a table. It could be a sign that says a certain thing on a door, and it could be weapons or other objects like that I've mentioned. So effectively, with AI-enabled object recognition, it's going to parse through all of your video evidence and identify, again, the precise moments in time and just the videos generally where those objects are detected, and then effectively you can search for them. So I like to give the analogy, I keep referring to searching, I give the analogy of Google, right? Just think of like a Google search bar. You could type in, show me all videos where, in this case, a Jeep Wrangler exists. So again, it's going to return to you not only the videos where the Jeep Wrangler exists, but also those precise moments of time within the video. So another case where AI can help, and this also ties back to the lobby monitoring scenario where I gave an example of people potentially speaking a foreign language that the reviewer might not be able to easily review. AI can take the audio portion of video and audio itself for audio recordings and translate from one language to another, not the audio portion, but the transcript, right? So that speech-to-text part. So first you would transcribe the audio and video files. You take that unstructured data, you make it structured. You can then search it for keywords, right, like I mentioned on a previous slide. But if the transcript is in a foreign language and your search terms are in a different language, right, your native language, you're not going to get any search hits, right? So you need to be able to leverage the AI-based ability to do what we call machine translation, which effectively would take those foreign language transcripts and normalize them or translate them into the native language that you speak, such that when you enter your search terms into that Google-like search bar, you're able to generate search hits, effectively audio files, where even though the individuals on the audio files or the video files were speaking a foreign language and you're searching in your native language, you're still going to get search term hits effectively. So again, facilitating review, making it much easier to find what's relevant or responsive to your matter.
Hey, Chris, we've got a question from the audience.
Sure.
So it's more relevant to transcription as opposed to translation. So let me just run it by you and see how this goes. Here's the question, Chris. In the past, I've had difficulty with transcription tools being unable to properly capture content if the speaker has a regional accent or a deep, quiet voice. Do you have any sense of what the accuracy rate is now?
So accuracy rate, there are a lot of variables that go into accuracy rate, right? One is exactly what you mentioned. Somebody is, potentially speaking quietly, or they might be speaking English, but it's, let's say, in a heavily French, as an example, accent. So all of those things will impact accuracy, but also quality of the audio and or video file as well. The quality of the recording will also impact accuracy. So I don't have a specific answer on accuracy. It's really a case-by-case thing. But I will tell you that there are two different types, let's say, of transcription capabilities. Those that are generally trained, right, on, let's say, English, and those that are specifically trained on, let's say, English spoken by people with a heavy accent, right? But they're just speaking English but with a heavy accent. And what oftentimes you can do is run both of those transcription capabilities simultaneously. One will obviously do a better job at just identifying common words that are spoken in the English dictionary. In other cases, right, the specially trained transcription capability, if you will do a better job of identifying people with a certain regional accent and transcribing their words accurately into English. So you can take this notion of combining multiple transcription capabilities, those that are generally trained with those that are specially trained, to increase accuracy.
Okay, great.
Awesome. So in terms of the, I believe this is the last AI-enhanced capability that can prove helpful. So oftentimes with e-disclosure or e-discovery, once you do call down, what's relevant or responsive to your matter, there might be sensitive information that exists in those called down files, right? So you might need to redact that sensitive information. And similar to, audio and video being more difficult to search without AI than documents and email, text-based information, redaction of audio and video poses the same challenges. So how do you effectively redact an hour-long video where you might only care about redacting some information that appears on the screen or in the audio portion of the video at minute 10 of that hour-long video, or minute 10, 20, and 45, right? It becomes kind of a burdensome challenge that can't easily be solved without AI-powered and enabled tools. So in the case of redaction, where AI helps is it allows you to not only, let's say insert white noise in certain portions on certain time segments of the audio, but it will also let you redact and, in this case, blur, and you can see an example of it in the screenshot here, certain faces or certain objects at those precise moments of time in the video. And what's really cool about this video-based redaction is that, in this example, this individual, let's say I want to redact his face for the entirety of the video, he might not stay in a single location, right? He might be mobile, for lack of a better term, moving around throughout the various video frames. He might be walking around the room. He might end up partially obscured or behind someone at some point in time. But you want to make sure that his face is always obscured. It's always redacted. So what AI really helps you do, and this ties in a bit to face recognition as well, is identify that one person's face that you need to redact and no one else's on the video. Draw a little box around that person's face, and it will redact all instances of that person's face and blur it out throughout the entirety of the video, even if that individual moves around, various portions of the screen. So it saves you a bunch of time, and it makes it much, much easier to redact audio and video than previous methods. In some cases, people had trouble doing it at all. So.
Okay. Chris, why don't we talk a little bit about Veritone's products, Illuminate, Translate, and Redact?
For sure. So I promise this won't be death by PowerPoint at this point. But so we generally, in the previous 5 slides, referred to various AI capabilities that facilitate the review of audio and video unstructured data. Let's now shift to talking about specifically what Veritone has from a software application perspective to bring a lot of those generalized capabilities I mentioned to you previously together to address a variety of use cases. And the first use case is effectively intelligent e-discovery or e-disclosure and really early case assessment. So again, if you have a large amount of audio and video that you need to pare down, to call down, to make sense of, to find out what's responsive to your legal matter, you can ingest it into a product that we have at Veritone called Veritone Illuminate. And effectively, what Illuminate will do is it'll run all of those capabilities as needed, right? Kind of a la carte. You can choose which ones run. All those capabilities, though, that we mentioned on the previous slide. So if you have a corpus of audio and video and you only want to transcribe it, through Illuminate you can transcribe it. and then it becomes searchable. Let's say some of those transcripts are in a foreign language, and you want to take some subset of the transcripts that are in a foreign language and translate those via AI to a normalized language, like your native language, let's say it's English. You could do that in Illuminate. But ultimately, at the highest level, Illuminate provides you with a Google-like search bar that lets you search not only for keywords and phrases, but again, for faces, right? For objects, for certain people, for certain characters or words that might appear in a frame of video. And do so in a very scalable, efficient way, such that you can really cull down audio and video in a very short period of time. But what we've also added to Illuminate is the ability to leverage text analytics. So text analytics effectively allows you to browse and explore your data without having to search for certain keywords and phrases. So in the context of searching for keywords and phrases, it implies that you know exactly what you're searching for. And while you might be pretty thorough in generating that list of keywords and or phrases, there could be some things you didn't think about searching for, and you might therefore miss certain important or relevant audio and video files that had you been more thorough, you would have identified. So where text analytics comes in is it will again run through all those audio and video files. It'll automatically identify the people that were, let's say, discussed on the audio portion of video or that appear in a video. It'll automatically say these 5 videos have individuals in them, so you can just click on those 5 videos and you'll be able to review them. Or it will mention or visualize effectively what the topics of a corpus of audio and video are. So if you're working on a case that is criminal and it has to do with some kind of criminal event, text analytics allows you to just browse and navigate those videos versus searching for certain keywords to find what's relevant. It'll bubble them up to the surface for you. So with Veritone Illuminate, it's all about, I like to think of it in terms of a funnel. It's about ingesting a lot of data at the top side of the funnel, all unstructured audio and video, making it structured, making it searchable, making it explorable through text analytics and browsable, and then enabling you to really cull it down really quickly and efficiently.
Hey, Chris?
Yep.
Question.
Sure.
So you've got all this data in Illuminate. Can I take this data out? Can I put it into another platform? How does that work? Can we export the data?
Yeah, for sure. So effectively, Illuminate, you can think of it as more of an early case assessment solution for audio and video. So you're taking that initial swag at the audio and video, you're paring it down, you're culling it down, and then you take that relevant subset and you push it off into the review platform of your choice. It could be Relativity, it could be platforms from OpenText, could be Viewpoint, right? Whatever technology that you're using to ultimately, review in detail that culled results from Illuminate. And so Illuminate is built in a very extensible way that allows users to export to a wide variety of review platforms, including the ones that I mentioned previously. And it does it not through direct integration with any of those platforms, but instead the export, the format of what's exported can easily be ingested into any of the aforementioned review solutions.
That's great. Thanks.
Okay. So the next solution that Veritone has is a product called Veritone Translate. And Translate is all about expediting the translation of documents, right? So I mentioned previously that we can translate the transcripts from audio and video, but oftentimes our customers come to us and say, well, we just have some documents or some emails, let's say they're Microsoft Office documents or emails that need to be translated. Can you help us with that? And so Veritone Translate is a very simple user interface that supports 2 different types of translation. The first type of translation is text-to-text translation. So that's effectively loading text files or extractions from text files into Translate, choosing the source language, right, the language that those files are in, and then choosing a destination language, in other words, what you want to translate to, clicking a button, and the translate will happen, right? You'll have the translated documents output from there. And then with native document translation, this often comes up for customers as well, where effectively what it allows you to do is upload files or documents in a foreign language in their native format. So by native format, I could mean a Microsoft Word document or an Excel file or a PowerPoint file. Also PDF files would be considered native documents. And when the translation occurs, right, you still pick your source and destination language, but when the translation occurs, it outputs not a text file like with text-to-text translation. It'll output that native format of the document. So again, if you upload a Word file, and in that Microsoft Word file there are images, and the images have certain justifications, and there might be tables of information or bulleted lists or any rich text, native document translation will translate all of the text that's present but leave the formatting intact. So it allows you to preserve that original native file and its formatting while translating only the text. So all of that is enabled through an application that we have called Veritone Translate.
Hey, Chris?
Yes.
Are there any limitations on file formats? Or is there a Illuminate and Translate? Is any file formats they don't support?
So yeah, with Illuminate, generally any type of audio or video file that's a standard format is supported. So by standard format, I mean MP3 files, MP4 files, WAV files, the common open source standard audio and video formats. Not oftentimes, but sometimes we will have scenarios where customers come to us with a proprietary format. This is often the case in some of the criminal proceedings that our customers have been part of or work on, in which case there might be a very proprietary method of capturing that audio and video. And the files that are recorded and generated from those proprietary software solutions is also proprietary, right? The file format and the encoding is proprietary. So in those cases, we would need to convert them into a standard format, and we have a variety of ways to help customers do that. But effectively, that's Illuminate. And then with respect to Translate, and I kind of touched on this already, Translate is all about document translation. So it supports text files, as I mentioned, but then also Microsoft Office documents, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, open Office documents, which we see sometimes come out of our UK customers as well, kind of a competing solution to Microsoft Office, so we support open Office as well, email files, and then PDF files as well.
That's great. Thank you.
Awesome. So the last Veritone kind of native application that I'll review is effectively the, as we call it, intelligent audio and video evidence redaction. And I kind of hinted toward this or talked about this a little bit when I just generally mentioned, AI-assisted redaction of audio and video. But effectively what our Redact application allows you to do, again, is, let's say there's a workflow where you're ingesting into Illuminate, you're taking that initial swag at culling down your unstructured audio and video data, and then ultimately at some point you might want to redact some subset of that. So the Redact application is, you could think of it as a sister application to Illuminate and even a sister application to Translate that allows you to redact all of your data in a very streamlined, kind of intelligent way. Just again, some ways that we're able to do that using video as an example is we're able to identify faces in the video. You can draw little boxes around those faces that you want to redact, and throughout the entire duration of that video, that person's face will be redacted even if that person moves around the video. That's also true for objects as well. So oftentimes, let's say license plates or other types of PII, credit cards have been present in customer videos, things like that, right? You can effectively draw boxes around those, click a redact button, and throughout the entire duration of the video, those objects will be obscured. Similarly, though, the audio portion of the video and for audio standalone can be redacted in a similar way. So if you know that a certain portion of time in an audio file or in a video file, you do want to redact what's being said, not only in the audio itself, but also in the transcript that's generated. If you're doing transcription in Illuminate, you can black out those portions in time on the transcript and insert white noise automatically into the video, the audio feed of the video for those portions of time. So our Redact application allows you to take that unstructured data from Illuminate, and if there is sensitive information or people that you want to redact, to be able to easily do that. Okay, and so next we will review, and finally we will review some takeaways and best practices. And I think for that I'll pass off to Amy to explain what she's seen given her experience.
Absolutely. The first thing, as it says in the slide there, audio and video are going to be featured more and more in litigation cases. We've already seen that anyway. There have always been a slight reluctance on, seeing that as viable evidence, but going forward, I don't think the courts or even defense would allow us to get away with that. Please stay away from Windows Media Player. It's not the tool of today's reviews, etc. We've had some great explanations on detailed intelligent tools with artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is the way to go with e-discovery as a whole, not just the audio and video, but all other structured data. And we're already seeing a lot of evidence of how positive that can work and how much good that's supporting the work that we're doing. E-discovery is definitely no longer a tick box exercise or trying to boil the ocean to find as much as you can, dump it, and let somebody else worry about it. Regulations in itself and civil procedure rules dictate, the reasonableness and among other things. So we need to be very mindful of those when we're sharing or disclosing data out there. And with the audio and visual, knowing that we deal with hours and hours and hours of recording, we will need to start looking at how can we positively redact these things, how can we reduce and be specific with the data. And again, this is where the artificial intelligence tool comes into play. In my opinion, in order to have a successful e-discovery process or exercise, you'll always need to start looking at technology innovation, the new things that are coming out. Again, we've heard a lot about the machine learning and artificial intelligence, but it's not just that as a standalone. This will have to be a combination of the technology as well as the human expertise and the knowledge that we all have and we use in order to implement these tools and use them effectively. So these are what I see as the takeaways. And I do believe if you have any other questions, please do contact Chris and the others, and we'll be able to respond to them further in more detail. Thanks, Chris.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. And so, Mike, do we have any other questions coming in at this point?
Not at this time.
Okay, actually, I just see one that came in just now, and the question is, actually, there's two that just came in, so I'll just read them off. The question is, you mentioned accuracy of transcription earlier. What does Veritone do specifically to increase transcription accuracy, right? So I kind of talked about that in the context of a person with a heavily accented voice, right? Speaking English, but with a heavy foreign accent. So that's one area where, a generally trained transcription engine would experience a reduction in accuracy, and you would need a purpose-built transcription engine to better and more accurately transcribe in that context. But another example that oftentimes comes up when we deal with customers on their legal matters is sometimes the nature of the audio and video that's being recorded, the discussions that people are undergoing involve very technical or industry-specific terms. So I'll give an example where there was one matter with a pharmaceutical drug company where there were a number of telephone calls recorded from certain reps and agents at that company, and they were talking about drugs that the pharmaceutical company obviously produced and manufactured, and those drug names are very, very specific, and they don't make all that much sense in terms of common English language, right? They're not words that are in the common English dictionary. So if you try to run a general transcription engine on that kind of audio recording, what's going to happen is it might do a really good job and be really accurate at all the words that are in the common English dictionary, but for the words that are not, right, those, in this case, those pharmaceutical drug names, it's going to mistranscribe those and therefore bring down the accuracy of the overall transcription. So again, that same notion of this kind of bifurcation of two different types of transcription capabilities, in this case, you would still have that generally trained transcription capability. You would still run that against all of your data, in this case, the recorded sales rep telephone calls. And then you would run that second specially trained capability for transcription that has been trained on pharmaceutical drug names and understanding what those are when it detects them in the spoken portion of video or in an audio file itself, and therefore more accurately transcribing them. But where Veritone really comes in and kind of our secret sauce is we have a cognitive, we call it a cognitive capability for transcription that sits on top of, if you think of it that way, both of those transcription capabilities. So there's the general one that's going to do a good job at the English language words that are in the common dictionary, and there's the specially trained one that might do a poor job at the common English language words, but it does a really good job of identifying the pharmaceutical names, the drug names in this case. And what our layer on top of it, which we call conductor, does is it will blend the highest confidence results from the transcripts of both of those capabilities. So it's going to take the highest confidence results from the generally trained capability and the highest confidence results from the specially trained capability, blend them into a single transcript so that from your perspective, if you're a user, and let's say you're using Illuminate, when you do a search across that corpus of, in this case, audio recordings, let's say you were searching for a certain drug name, you're going to get a search hit. And then when you actually view that transcript, you will also have a nice single consolidated, high confidence, highly accurate blended transcript. So we have proprietary things that we do at Veritone. The main one is Conductor, as I just mentioned, that does a really good job of increasing accuracy. And just to give some numbers, I mentioned before that I can't just generally state the accuracy of transcription because there's so many variables that go into it. But we can do things to mitigate scenarios that would decrease accuracy, as I just described. And so effectively, let's say we have a baseline accuracy of 70% or 75%. With Conductor sitting on top of it, like in this example, we see a 10 to 15% uplift on accuracy. So if you had 70% accuracy historically, you could be at 80% or 85% with Conductor. So Veritone has some really cool technology to increase accuracy, and it's something that differentiates us from a lot of other transcription capabilities in the market. And I see one last question.
Yeah, Chris, I just want to dive in here. Yeah, no, I just want to dive in here and just sort of clarify. What's the sort of common or typical workflow in Illuminate? You talked a little bit about the transcription piece, but Illuminate particularly with regard to, just kind of walk for the attendees' benefit, walk us through a common workflow for, I guess, audio video.
Exactly, yeah, sure, for sure. So again, what Illuminate doesn't do is it doesn't help in collection or processing, initial processing of the audio and video. So it assumes that you have some corpus of audio and video that you've already captured, you've already recorded, it's readily available in a common format. So the workflow effectively is to ingest that audio and video into Illuminate, and we have a number of tools to facilitate that. We can ingest data from a wide variety of sources as well. You can upload it from your desktop. You can upload it from common file repositories like Dropbox, OneDrive, Box.net. You can also upload it from an SFTP site or from Amazon's repository called Amazon S3. So we have a wide variety of ways to ingest the data and get it in. And then once it's in, you choose which cognitive capabilities, which AI capabilities you want to run. So say you're only interested in transcribing, right, your audio and video. Then you would choose only to transcribe your audio and video. Let's say, though, that you're also interested in running facial recognition capabilities, or I gave you that example previously of Conductor. If you wanted to run all those capabilities as well, right after you ingest your data, you select which ones of those you want to run, and you run them. And then once those capabilities have run and they produce their output, be it transcripts or identified faces or identified objects or what have you, you would use the tools within Illuminate, that Omni search bar, that Google-like search bar that I mentioned before, to put in your search terms, to search for people, to search for objects, and to get search results, but also to leverage the text analytics or analytics capabilities that Illuminate has, allow you to, again, visually explore your data to help cull it down. And then from that point, in terms of workflow, you can take that subset, that relevant subset of data, and export it to a review platform of choice, as I mentioned previously, or if you just want to use Illuminate to do the review, you can do that as well, and you can send information that might need to be redacted to our Redact application, and then ultimately export from there as part of production. So the workflow from soup to nuts is ingestion, running the cognitive capabilities, using search, using text analytics to call down, optionally redacting, and then exporting.
That's great. So we've got a couple of minutes left. I guess I just want to ask any sort of closing thoughts. Maybe start with Amy.
Yeah, I mean, it's really great when we have webinars like this and talking about technology and how it can help us. We know that in e-discovery, as technology innovation progresses, there's always going to be more development with regards to the data that we have in scope that we need to review and the court requirements, etc. So I think my parting thought would be, do not be afraid to utilize audio and visual data as part of your litigation efforts. There are some great tools, and we've heard, some of the tools described today that we can use with artificial intelligence at the back end. I think it should be utilized a lot more so that you can be in a defensible position when it comes to litigation matters and ensuring that you've produced all the necessary data that you are required to disclose. I also do know that there are some organizations who go as far as switching the audio side of things within the environment off, just so that they don't really have to bring that into the mix, when it comes to e-discovery. And that's mainly because there's never been the really right tools to deal with that kind of data until now. So as I said, it might be worth looking at, within your environment where your e-discovery or disclosure plans are, and factor in the fact that audio and visual is essential and that there are the tools out there, and start looking at some of the tools that are out there in the market. We've heard again about these great tools being described today, not just for redacting, being able to search, being able to review, being able to transcribe, and being able to translate. I mean, once upon a time, OCR was and still is part of artificial intelligence. It's just so well used now. It's not seen as that, but in its time and until now, it is an innovation that we can't do without. And we're going to see that the same with audio and visual e-discovery tools on the market there as well. Chris, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I would just concur with exactly what you said. I mean, do not be afraid to use AI-assisted tools to help in facilitating your review and your culling of audio and video evidence. The technology has come a long way in the past, let's say, 5 years, and it's continuing to innovate at a really rapid pace. So effectively, technologies that were less accurate, 5 years ago are a heck of a lot more accurate today. So again, just ultimately helps you not miss out on relevant data and do your job more efficiently.
Fantastic. Well, that brings us to the end of our webinar. Thanks everyone for joining us today on the ACED's webinar channel. Thanks Chris Ricciuti, Amy Tal, and of course our fabulous webinar producer, Deja Miller. And of course, thanks to Veritone for a great presentation today. Please visit aceds.org for a complete list of our upcoming webinars, and reach out to Chris or visit veritone.com if you have any questions about today's webinar. That'll do it for today. We'll see you next time on the ACED's webinar channel.